Brittany, Stringfellow, Otey, professor of law at matters with the great. Hi, thanks for spending your lunch with me. I know you would totally do this on your own. So bullshit by the end of the month, right? No, I'm glad to. So I'm Brittany Stringfellow Otey. I've been at Pepperdine since 2016. I run the legal aid company that is on Zero at the university. So we actually have a lot of crossover clientele. You may have gotten a phone call from me that sounds like, I'm working with so-and-so on expungement, and they realize now that they really do what you've asked them to do, but they're ready now, and so you remind them. So I think that's what often another just connection is that for a little while back, foster so complexity of your job, system, all the things.
Money can tell.
I have
Okay.
I respect the most. Close watching that all happen. So I'm really honored to get time to be here. And then the other thing I want to tell you is that this work, I've been writing on this for several years, but really it comes from pretty personal things because I love my work in the legal clinic. I love my students. I love being on Zero. I love being where people aren't always able to find help. And there are many days where I cannot imagine going back tomorrow. And so when I came to there's a little bit of a crisis one moment where I was just like, I love this. This is my calling. I hate this. I can't do this anymore. So how does all that work? And so how do I not just become angry, resentful, and just whatever, and die inside? So this is my personal journey toward hope and life and all the things. But it's also been my academic journey. So I talk at conferences about this. I've written about it. And I really want our profession to think a little bit better about it because from my perspective, we've spent way too much money and too much time and gotten into that's far too difficult to earn. Have a crummy life. Like I don't understand that. And we're a very competitive bunch. So it's really surprising to me that we're like, oh well, that's just how it goes. Like what else in our life do we just spend like that? I don't understand. So anyway, that's kind of my story. That's why I care about things. That's why I'm glad to spend time with you. So I thought we'd start thinking back to law school. Maybe just a couple people around you just share what kinds of things that you want your future colleagues and clients to say about you. What kind of lawyer did you want to be described as? How did you want to experience your work life and relationships and the way that those all interact? And what did you want your daily, weekly rhythm? That's a lot of questions, but just turn to the person next to you, just share maybe an answer to one of those. And I'll call out. Some of the things that we're hoping for. Friday. What kinds of things were you imagining 10, 5, 20, 30 years ago? Awesome. What else? Respect. I'm sorry. I missed it. What'd you say? Yes. Yes. Yes, it's supposed to be at added benefit. What else? Family. What else? Maybe two more. Yes, balance. One more. That appreciation. So the bigger question is it matching up? Maybe you're like, oh, I'll share that later. That's fine. But that's the kind of question that I think just rattles my mind. Is this what I thought it was going to be? If not, how do I fix that? What do I need to do? And so that's one of the things I want to talk about today. When I share this with law students, so I don't know about you, but I didn't learn about balance in law school. Nobody told me about trauma. Nothing. Oh, save the world. And so now I feel like I have to ring on everybody's parade every first year and tell them that there's a lot of, there's a lack of well-being in our profession. Got to be honest. I also am really big on like, I was in the right thing, but I start with the lack of well-being. So lawyers lead other professions in depression, alcoholism, substance abuse. I think that's troubling. Like I said, we should be competitive about that and worry about that. It's not starting in practice, it's starting in law school. Most recent survey of student well-being was in 2014, and alcohol use is out of control. Drug use, the ones who will admit to using non-prescription drugs they don't have prescriptions for, admit that it's increased once they're in law school, so that's real stuff. Mental health, you got like more, almost half of the classes screening positive for anxiety. You've got depression, eating disorders, and on smaller levels, but still there, self-harm, about suicide. So that's what's happening at the beginning, and then it's just following through into the profession. So 21% to 36% have problems, are problem drinkers. Mental health, we've got depression, anxiety, and stress. And the places where we're seeing it the most, one of these you can feel good about it. Well, I don't know if you feel good about it, but lawyers and then the other one has been the first 10 years of your practice. And so we're seeing it from the very beginning straight through. Oh, hi, Lancaster. It's nice to see you. Or hear you. Hi. Hi. You're welcome. So I think what has to happen is we've got to get real about what's in front of us. And so you love this little hard hat photo I found. Very hard to find a woman in a hard hat photo. So I feel very proud of this. But what occurred to me is that when you enter a construction zone, or you're going to be an engineer or whatever, there's just an acknowledgement of like, you're probably not going to die today, but you should wear a hard hat because there are dangers to wear, right? And so that same kind of perspective. This job is not going to kill you, most likely. We're hoping. Be aware of what occupation has a impact. So I find that there are three primary occupational hazards. The first one is just stress. A lot of you probably type A probably lived off of stress most of your life. It serves you well. It's why your heart beats a little fast when you present to court, or back when you were in law school, you did a presentation or whatever. It's good. Stress is a good thing. It gets our heart pumping. It gets the air into our lungs. Our synapses are firing. We're starting stress. That's a wonderful thing. The downside is if it's prolonged, right? So when we see prolonged stress, that's when you can't seem to fix the cough or the cold. You're sick a lot. You're stressed out. You're distracted. All those types of things. So stress is just a general piece of our existence. It has positives, definitely for some negatives. The second one is when you've got that prolonged stress, and you see it a lot with folks who are prolonged exposure to emotionally demanding situations. I don't know if you have any. But it's that long, and it also shows up a lot with people, and it shows up a lot when you don't have a lot of resources. So, anyway, so that you end up with this long stress that ends up in burnout. And with burnout, you end up, what happens is you've got that the physical symptoms, but also what creeps in is a lot of cynicism. So for me, when I see burnout creeping in, the situation in front of me is not messed up. The human beings in front of me are who I see. I don't need to express. And so when I'm focused on, I just see the world. I take some of that home. I'm irritated when my daughter wants to watercolor because that is the most messy, ridiculous thing any 4-year-old could ever want to do. And I'm like, hey, just scoot back and see if there's anything going on at work because it's totally appropriate for a 4-year-old to want to, right? So when you start to sort of see that slide into other places, and again, you've got this illness stuff, and you've got, the cynicism, I think, is where you really start to. And then the third piece is the vicarious trauma. How many of you have had some training on vicarious trauma? We need to really, okay, this is good. This is really good. So vicarious trauma. All right. So this is the burnout and secondary trauma that's associated with helping professionals who are working with people. Your most susceptible folks, and when they started to look at this kind of stuff was after 9/11. When you see PTSD, depression, anxiety in the workers, in people who had been a part of the rescue, like, hey, you weren't stuck in a building. Why are you so traumatized by this later? They started looking at that and they started thinking, oh, it's actually within a whole lot of people. And more recently, we started to notice that, hey, judges and lawyers are affected by this. It took us a very long time to admit this. We're very proud. We don't think we have any businesses like other people, but we're just starting to come around. The thing is that this actually stems from empathy, and I think this is such an interesting, situation in that the very thing that allows me to have empathy, to have a client relationship, to learn about them, and see they're good, all of those things help make those as their advocate. They have a flip side, right? So they have a side that whatever that trauma is that the client has experienced, as I'm hearing about it and I'm connecting, those little neurons in my mind are actually retraining. So while I have not gone through that experience, I take some of it with me. And if I don't recognize the fact that I've taken some of that with me and I don't do something about it, it just builds up in my system and I just walk around with trauma. So they call it compassion fatigue, they call it secondary trauma, a couple of other things, but the big vicarious trauma. So hearing the stories, seeing the images, and identifying with them are the things that make us great advocates. But they're also, it's kind of the shrapnel. It's the shrapnel of what the work that we're doing. What happens is if it's unchecked, it results in a negative outlook, right? So that same cynicism that comes from burnout shows up again. And suddenly the world looks pretty dark, it's hard to see the light. And we end up with negative assumptions about other people, about situations. So Charles Figley, who's a psychologist who did a lot of work in this area, calls it the disorder that affects those who do their work well. So congratulations. You've landed here. So, share again. I'm a professor, so I'm going to do this, but how has your work here, or maybe your career, affected the way that you view the world around you? a safe space. Yeah. Yeah. Right. That feels very systemic. Got some complexity. Yeah. Or, okay. Maybe they do anything. My children are never going on a support. I trust very few. Four of them. It's really a sad situation that they're going to happen if they never get to 20. I try to best, but mostly I'm never late. What else? Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So it tweaks. I mean, it tweaks everything so many ways about the way that we, right? And so I think it's important that when I went to a training much like this and we had that conversation, it was really freeing to me. Oh, things, you know. But getting gas at night for me is not like your average Joe getting gas for other people. I don't know. I just am like so aware. I'm hyper aware, and I know way too many stories, right? And so you end up just yeah, you're just a little freaked out. Some of the feedback I've gotten is that there's no justice in the world. The world is a dangerous place. So an interesting thing about all this is that by bearing the suffering of other people, you actually have the ability to do so. So we want to. So fortunately for us, people have started to look into this idea of vicarious trauma. There was like a little pocket of time when they were really looking into it, and it haven't done much since, but at least we've got some data. In 2006, a study came out that the judges are unequivocally affected by the stories that they hear. There's an added layer of difficulty for judges to process that kind of stuff because they don't have a large peer group of folks that are working those things through, and it's not really hasn't necessarily been something that's been heard. So there's definitely that vicarious trauma happening on the bench. I think another interesting study came out actually out of Israel, and they looked at parole hearings, and they looked at whether you were successful in requesting parole. And if you asked for parole before lunch, your chances were not good. If you asked for parole right after lunch, much better. So what I'm thinking is, if justice can somehow be skewed by a standard, I feel like maybe some of the stuff that I'm experiencing as an advocate is difficult to workplace for a difficult, I don't want to say difficult population, but a bunch of difficult scenarios. But I'm thinking that probably the way that I behave, the way that I think, the way that I advocate is somehow. And then finally, in 2011, they did a study of the public defenders in Wisconsin. They found PTSD, anxiety, and stress in high degrees. When I read that study, the takeaway I have is that I do not understand a lawyer in Wisconsin having the same manifestations as someone who's been divorced. So something's happening, and we've got to talk about it, because PTSD should not flow from an office. Really strange to me, right? And so, and what they found is that the heavy caseloads, the exposure to trauma, and the so what do we get when we've got all this building up and we're not doing anything about it? All these awesome side effects: ill health, absenteeism, job turnover, low productivity, difficulty making decisions, slow. You're not happy, you're cynical, you don't like your clients, you don't like your job, you don't like people to work with, none of it. impaired judgment in worst cases, low motivation, and then the susceptibility to those negative coping behaviors. So whatever that is, substance abuse, drinking, whatever it is, addictive behaviors, that's where you start to see that happen. Doesn't make you a great employee, it doesn't make you a great advocate, and it doesn't, I think just bottom line, doesn't lead to a great life. And so the other thing that this ends up being, we think about who our clientele are and that they don't have a lot of choices that represent them, this is their attorney pool. We're not careful, right? And so the access to justice is what really gets fired up. So recently, the ABA National Task Force on Lawyer Wellbeing, and they've figured out that yes, well-being is important. They've got a few reasons, three reasons to take action. First one is that if we focus on well-being, then we're going to increase organizational success, right? So productive people are more successful, and we're going to have better. It's better for business. Also, when we've got so much turnover because people are like, forget it, I'll go do something else, that's a pretty expensive situation. So you're constantly training, you're constantly finding new people, and that's just it. The second thing that they noticed was ethics and professionalism. So competence is required in the rules of professional conduct, and they say that 40 to 70% of disciplinary actions have some sort of substance abuse or depression involved. And so if we look at those things, then hopefully we're going to have less to do. And then finally, they just said, it's the right thing to do. And I'm like, oh, lawyers, like, yay us. Let's look around and like, your life is horrible. I just want to help you. I don't want you to just suffer, right? And so it is, in fact, the right thing to do. But as I mentioned, I actually think the thing that compels me, if I can't do it for myself, the thing that compels me is that this is an access to justice issue. Like I said, if these are the folks who have so little choice, they can't shop around for a lawyer. And if this is the pool that we're giving them, and we're giving them so much turnover that nobody quite knows what's going on, I just think that that's wrong. I think that our profession should be embarrassed by that, and that we've got to do something with it. A couple of studies that I read about public interest lawyers is that 50% in every study, all across the country, at least 50%, we're looking to get a new job with it. So there's that constant turnover. And so you end up with lack of access for the clients. You've got poor work products that are vulnerable. And so looking at the files, the model rule says that we've got to have competent representation for clients. California just talks about competent and service, meaning mental, emotional, and physical ability reasonably necessary for the performance of such service. So what does that look like? Competence presumes a lack of impairment. So we're looking at sufficient sleep. Longer without food than without sleep. You treat sleep because I don't. But it's true. Substance free. Substance. Not overcome by negative thoughts and emotions. Cynical lawyers. I don't know if you're confident one. And maintaining proper boundaries. So not being overly involved and not being overly distant, right? And we don't spend a lot of our time, I should say, I don't spend a lot of my time for vulnerable situations where I'm relying on someone that has knowledge that I don't know anything about. I think we have the ability to like research things and kind of get our arms around things even if we don't quite know about it. So I don't feel vulnerable when I'm taking my car to the mechanic. I don't feel vulnerable. But where I do feel vulnerable, as an example, is the medical field, right? So my nephew had open heart surgery when he was 4 months old. And I just remember, that was the first time that I was like, oh, I think this might be what my clients feel like. Because I don't know the field. I don't know this person. I don't know if they're trustworthy. And I realize we don't do open heart surgery, but it felt like that moment of vulnerability for me. And all I could think is, I hope he and his family are getting along well and he's not agitated. I hope he's not hooked up on anything. I just want him to come in and use all of his skill to do a really great job. And he did. But that was the first thing I could do. I was like, oh, what is that vulnerability? I just don't experience it. My privilege bars me from so many things. But that moment of really recognizing that is, it's one of those things that really goes into competence. This is the kind of person I want to be when I show up. So technology makes these things a little more complicated. Technology is wonderful. It allows for flexibility between your work and your personal life. It allows for social connection. There's all these wonderful things about technology. But what I'm seeing in my research is that it also is setting up a little bit of a dicey space. So it eliminates boundaries. Some of you might not even remember these days, but like when I first started practicing, I had like a filing cabinet with paper, and I would put the files in the cabinet when I left work. Then I would go home and do whatever, and then they would be there when I got back. I mean, that is not my life, right? Like that is, your work is always with you. You have a phone, right, or whatever. And so that boundary has changed, and we haven't acknowledged that and worked out what our new privilege should be. Social media also presents some ethical challenges. Man, if you Google the ways that people have breached confidentiality on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, one of my favorites is some guy that like wrote a ditty about the trial from hell that was Gilligan's Island and put it on Facebook and like bash the judge and the client and whoever. And so, yes, it's a place to connect and to get some camaraderie, but the venting can get a little out of control and it's a little. And then our digital natives, folks who have never not been online, I think they're particularly susceptible because they don't even have, my students don't even have the image of the file cabinet that I have in the back of my mind. And I feel like I'm like at the end of the file cabinet days. And so just that sense that like there's a space for work and a space for the rest of my life, that line is. So, this is all true. My question is, how are we going to increase? I can't find it in my own life. I can't promise it to anybody that we can just make all of this go away and suddenly nothing's hard. But I think there are some practices that we could be doing to sort of undergird our resilience and we bounce back more quickly when the stress comes. And so what I started doing is looking to other disciplines. I looked to medicine, social work, and psychology. And you know it, they talk about this with their students in law school. They talk about it as a profession. I'm not saying they do it perfectly, but it's at least a part of their discipline. So I think law can learn a lot from on that. And so they come up with 3 out of those fields. There are 3 things that I want to point out that I think would be helpful. The first is psychoeducation. This is understanding what's going on underneath the surface. So this is understanding vicarious trauma, understanding compassion, and noticing it before we're laid up in the hospital with anxiety, right? This is noticing and learning about things like transference, knowing what's happening with our clients, that they are sometimes taking emotions and feelings and ideas that they have about other people, experiences from their life, and transferring them onto us. And so it's not actually happening, but it's going on in the room. So naming those things, starting to learn about what's happening psychologically in the room. Recognizing that our clients are traumatized. And so they've got 3 responses usually, right? Like fight, flight, or freeze. So when they're not behaving in the way that I think they should, it's stepping back and saying, whoa, what's going on? What's in front of me? How many scenarios are going through their mind at this moment? How is their childhood impacting right now? Because once we start to name these things and start to unpack them, one, I think we have less power, but 2, we just have a better sense of them that we're walking through. And the second piece of psychoeducation is, what can I do about it? So it's creating a self-care plan and then executing. So we'll talk a little bit about that. Second piece that they say is so important is social support. And whenever I bring this up in my classes, my students are like, oh, I haven't talked to anyone pre-law school in like 2 years. I'm like, go call your mom. It'll be good. So what do your social connections look like, right? Are they everybody's really focused on the same types of things? Everybody a little dated, like maybe spread out a little bit. Hang out with some people who are overly optimistic. They'll drive you crazy, but it might rub off, right? And so just sort of making sure that you're a little bit more well-rounded, connected, care about you, people that do appreciate the work you're doing, do appreciate that this is what you've decided to do with your life. Like, you know, give yourself a little underground. And then the final one that they suggest is organizational support. And actually, the APA report really spent a lot of time on this. I don't know who of you are supervisors and have any power on this, but we've got to really change the way we look at these things. Things aren't weaknesses. Letting your work affect you is not a weakness. It's actually being human. And so finding ways to sort of encourage well-being, encourage people to address things that are coming up for them, and just ways to sort of give some space. And so diversifying caseloads, making sure people take their time off. That's like the simplest thing we can do. Use our vacation days. Go to the doctor. Like, you know, like use these things. Take care of yourself. And then there's an interesting idea coming in out of the business world right now called periodization. And it's there's this company that's has worked with Olympic athletes and now is moving their way into the business world and working with Fortune 100s. And I was really interested in this when I was researching. But essentially, you don't train an Olympian by just saying like run more, run more, run more, right? So there's like very intricate days of rest. And sometimes you go on a light, I don't know about this personally, but you go on a light run and then you go on a long run. There's like a lot of strategy to the way that that people train. And so the idea is to kind of take that into the business world and say, hey, look, you've got to have really intense periods. You've got to have time for rest and recovery. And then they even suggest you need time of celebration. So you've got to take a minute when you win something or when you've worked hard on a thing to actually celebrate and rest and recuperate from that. And what they say is that there's actually a 15-week arc. So you want to make sure that those things have happened every 15 weeks. So a way to look at things, I think that's a helpful thing. And then they suggest establishing a well-being committee, assessing burnout and stress throughout the year. There's a lot of little tests that can be done for that. And then align your incentives. So Pepperdine just started passing out Nordstrom gift cards if you watch videos on stress. So guess what I do? I watch a lot of videos on stress. Don't give everybody gift cards, but still kind of fun. Anyway, so to start thinking as a community, how could we try to sort of make sure that we're all living a better life? That's, you know, that's the humanitarian piece of it. So I have a few. Let's see how much we're doing good. All right. So I want to give you a couple of really practical things. So you have on your chair this little handout. Does anybody else need one? Okay. All right, so we're passing those around. So you have the red, yellow, and green, yellow, and red. I made a lot. Not a person in my life wasn't in. Okay. So this is just a little thing to keep on your desk, sort of keeping a little check on yourself. Where am I at? So in the green area, when you're thriving, all is going well. I'll give you a couple of examples. What happens in the green area? Laugh. Like it. What else? People often say, I eat less fast food. Cook things. Or at least I get them prepared. Feel healthier? Yeah. Yes. Enjoy being around your child. Yay! Yes. Okay. Now when you get over to yellow, this is not crisis, but things aren't looking great. So what are some things that start to happen there? Happen. Less sleep. What was over here? Okay. You were working out in the green, that kind of starts to dwindle.
More fast food.
More fast food. Lots of coffee or other things? Yeah. Oh, what's back here? All right. And then when you get into red, like the never-ending eye twitch. But I waited too long to go on vacation the whole weekend because I always say it's the place like half off, like I'm so agitated, it's so ridiculous. But it's a lot harder to get from red into yellow than yellow and green. So catching it at the yellow is our goal, right? And just having this around the office, my house, wherever, is a helpful little guide to just say, okay, what do I need to shift in this next week? What do I need to do tomorrow to sort of bring it back until my balance is different, and that'll help our. Next thing is the self-care maintenance plan. All of this actually comes from the University of Buffalo, their School of Social Work. They make all their students start before they start the program. And essentially the idea is that we are made up of 4 quadrants. We've got our mind, our emotions, our body, and our spirit. And a lot of times in our idea of self-care, we'll go to one of those quadrants, right? But the idea that comes through social work and psychology is essentially that unless you're addressing all 4 quadrants, you're not going to be able to, you're not healthy. You're not going to be able to build your resilience. And so the first step is to look through these and sort of say, there's an actual little test here today. But look and see, like, which one am I sort of not using? There's an interesting anecdote that a lot of marathon runners are also alcoholics. Not perfect match, but an unusual number of marathon runners are also alcoholics. And the theory behind this is that they are really focusing on the body, really focusing on the physical to address their stress, and perhaps not looking at the other quadrants, addressing things that come up in them. So you want to be addressing all of them. So the way that I just say is just start what's one that's weaker, and just say, hey, I'm going to do one activity next month that addresses that. I never write down what I think about the world, and so I'm going to journal. Or I have not been in nature in like 2 years, so I'm going to go on a walk. One well-being specialist talks about just starting with 6 minutes. I don't think it's time, but in the biblical world, the 6 minute thing. So I'm just going to walk for 6 minutes at lunch. Just see the outside. Although it's kind of nice because you're back and forth. You can count that. But anyway, just starting with a 6 minute or really small. So that is, so why don't we do this? Let's break up again for a few minutes and look at these quadrants and just share something that looks interesting to try. What else? Yeah. Theater. Awesome. You want to act? Oh, I would totally be glad to. You know, what we did is we bought a seat to make ourselves go. Never like, but it's awesome because like we already paid for it. Yeah. Yoga. Awesome. What else? Yeah. Huh? Oh my gosh. You know how many times I've started by like, I plug this up and I plug my phone in the living room. No, I don't. No, I plug it in the living room. A little stand, ready to go when I'm ready. What else? Yeah. The key, do you have a commute? Audible. I it's Pepperdine, so becoming very well read. Or I can just listen to the news. Like I'm like, oh, I'm a happy person. What else? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Bungee jumping. Yes, but I've never had that suggested. You have some fun. Although I was telling my student I'm very risk averse. Okay. How about two more? What else? How about back in plan? There's a great article about how like kind of mechanizing your friendships, putting them on the calendar for the rest of the year. It's great because it's hard to make a plan, but it's not that hard to like have 12 plans that you miss a few of them, you know. So I've been doing that, like calendarizing all of it. It feels a little awkward to tell people like I can only see the first Thursday of every month. But it's better than never. So that's what I. Yeah, but that in response to this research, that's what I did. One more. Yeah. Seems like there's some tension about this. Maybe that'd be a good conversation. But yeah, that's a very important. In fact, in our office, because I'm in charge, I can. Everybody has to take one day of solitude where they only do things they like twice a year. Which is good because I have a mom, my coordinator is a mom with a new baby, and I'm like, well, that's great. She still goes to daycare, and you what you love. No cleaning your house. Well, she kind of loves that, but I'm like, no, she's very organized. But no, you just need to break. And if you can't do it during the work week, then you need to figure out how to have another weekend. So, all right, so that's the challenge. I mean, I think realizing that nobody's going to do it for us, that it's a matter of duty for us actually, but at the very heart of it, good grief, don't work so hard. You do such important and impossible. And so acknowledging that together, not just, highlighting people who just never stop, but instead highlighting folks who have a balanced life, good work while they're here, and have wonderful life outside of it as well. Like celebrating that and asking that of each other. Ask people to ask that of me, because I will immediately here on the list. So there's a great quote that I think is really kind of sums this up from one of a colleague named Jim. He says, if we work harder and harder, fueled by concern for our clients, our universe will start to shrink, almost imperceptibly, remarkably to our work. We all learn the intricacies of those things that we fight against. For instance, the death penalty opponent knows all the methods of death by lethal injection or the electric chair. Child protection advocates know all the different ways that caretakers can maltreat children. Human rights advocates deal daily in the details of torture and know each form by their necessity. We can too easily forget that the world is larger than our stage, and that despite all odds, beauty and hope still flourish. And so building this resilience is looking for that and finding it wherever it can be found, right? And being really intentional about that. It is not. I've got it. But I wanted to leave you with a couple of resources, apps that come up for me. Headspace is an app that helps you try meditation. Happify.com is science-based games that increase your optimism. I've never tried it. It's just like, I took down my list. Talkspace.com is online therapy. I am super straightforward with my students. I go to therapy every year, several sessions a year, just to keep my head on straight with the what in the world am I doing. And so I just suggest everybody do it. And if you don't have time, then maybe this Talkspace.com is a. And then the Sierra Club, all sorts of hikes, and we've got groups. You're ready to go hiking. And then obviously the Lawyer Assistance Program in California, they have several sessions in week counseling by yourself in crisis heading toward crisis. You don't have to get there. And then there's interesting stuff on the AP website, like the National Task Force on the Lawyer. And then I've given you my email. Would love to continue the conversation. I have time for questions. Let's go. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know some of the for knitting.
Yes.
Okay.
So I actually went on meetup.com. Sorry.
Maybe that's also
No, that would not help. And I actually went, linked me to the Sierra Club, and actually did their wilderness training program on training the leader of the Sierra Club to backcountry trail backpacking. So it's two different places.
I really that but the that I have comes like this. Some of this is not that those of us who manage have a responsibility to create a work environment and lessons, create a work environment that would incorporate much of what you said. Environment. Just because we're lawyers, any different than workers challenged by stress. I mean, having a 5-day work labor time for rest. So that our folks here are looking. I'm not in any way denigrating any of the solutions, but eventually it's going to have to be a systemic look that we're going to have to take, as the public defenders have done for the last 50 years, as far as the problems like caseloads and all of that. Because ultimately, I think that's how workplace historically came, and always. And so I think, in many ways, I would like training just for management to help us learn what does a healthy work environment look like and how we can give people that environment.
I don't know if that topic as much because I'm also, when I'm doing this, I'm talking about in big firms or whatever, and there's just not been a that until it's starting to kind of swell a little bit. But our profession has not been interested. And so I've been like, do what you can do on your own, But if we could finish that spectrum, the workplace takes responsibility. The dysfunction that we've got going on as well probably is the main thing. Any other questions or thoughts? Yeah. Yeah, and it was only this gap.
So what's and what else can I do? I've expressed my own. I just speak held against. I can't do. I don't have to.
Right.
What else am I supposed to do? Like the limitations of the structure.
Right. I don't probably have a satisfactory answer for you, but what I would say is that in August of 2017 is when the study came out on the task force study. They've got pages and pages of what each stakeholder needs to work on, and I would suggest that a committee form to talk about what the systemic stuff is within your organization. And they have they have line by line by line. These are 6 things we think you do. That would be a place to start. Others? All right. Well, I appreciate your work. I appreciate your attention and enthusiasm. These are your friends, party favorites.